Does your clutter own you? On Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, we'll teach you how to become aware of your clutter, along with action steps to declutter and create the life you desire. Come on, let's get started. Hey everyone, a special bonus episode today. I'm really excited. If you've been a long-time listener, you know that I did the Clearsight Clairvoyant program, and I've had my teacher Judy Nelson on a couple times. If you haven't listened to those interviews, I suggest that. She's wonderful. She introduced me to today's guest, and I love Ala. She is really wonderful, and she was needing someone to practice on to do card readings to get certification. And I was just blown away. She's obviously very intuitive, and that's part of the inspiration for her book. And I had gained such insight with her, not only with the card reading, but reading her book. Because I'm just going to encourage you, I should say, if you don't believe in past lives, just entertain it. You know, we have Doctor Strange and the multiverse, and all these wonderful things are being really introduced into our pop culture. I just read a book. I read almost 175 in 2022 for Goodreads, and I love mysteries, and found this new English author, and in her novel, the main character is able to go back in time to prevent something from happening. And it's really fascinating. And, you know, she goes to the physics professor who explains it, and until she reaches, so she gets all these clues before she goes to the last timeline to change everything. So I think culturally, we are way more aware of stuff like that. So I'm just going to encourage you, maybe you've heard of the Akashic Records, to listen to my interview today with Ala. She's a really wonderful guest. I read the book. It's really encouraging. And I have to say, I am a believer. I'm trying to decide, are we on the multiverse and everything's going on at once, or do we just have past lives and timelines just keep going linearly forward? And I was in France one time with my mother, God love her, because that's what a good mom does. And we were going to go into this tour, and it was underground. And I think it was tombs or something. And I had a panic attack from out of nowhere. And you will never convince me. It was just all of a sudden brought on that it was related to something from a past life. And when I thought about that, and I couldn't at the time have articulated that, but as I did my personal growth and read more and learned more, that's now what I believe has happened. And another interesting thing that someone said to me once, so I have a really big scar on my arm, and I was working and it was a burn. And someone once said to me, oh, that's kind of the energetic imprint still from when you had your arm cut off. So I know that might be a stretch for some people, but it just really rings true to me. So I would just encourage you, if you're a little skeptical, it's okay. I always look at things with a skeptical eye and say, does this feel true to me? Does this make sense? But we were a really wonderful interview with Ala, and I'm excited to introduce you to her today. So let me tell you about today's guest. Ala Kalunzi immigrated to the United States from the former Soviet Union. She holds 2 master's degrees in marriage and family therapy and spiritual psychology, with an emphasis on consciousness, health, and healing. Ala is a retired children's social worker, and she worked with underprivileged, abused, and neglected children for almost 20 years. She's a certified hypnotherapist and graduated from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute and has practiced for 25 years. She also graduated from the Clearsight Clairvoyant Institute and recently received her certification as a soul coaching oracle card reader. And I've mentioned she's fabulous. She is the author of Turning the Pages, which won for Most Moving Book of 2023 from the Moving Words. Welcome, Ala.
Thank you, Julie. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So we're going to talk about your book, but Turning the Pages, we've got a little shot here. We'll put links for everyone in the show notes. How can knowing our past lives help us? How can it help us clear clutter? How can it help us heal?
Well, first of all, knowing our past helps us to heal. And whether we're healing from inside out our memories, our cell memories, our relationship, our physical conditions, or clearing up our clutter. This is important because clearing the clutter is the form of healing our outside experiences as well as the inside.
1,000%. So I personally believe in past lives, although I'm toying with the uh what is it, the meta universe or whatever. It says like I'm here in 2022, but I'm also in 1863 at the same time. That makes my brain hurt. But what would you say to people? And I get that believing in past lives can be a stretch for people, but I still think it's beneficial and your book's beneficial because even if they don't believe in it, there's still a benefit. So what are your thoughts about that?
I believe that the book actually had a side effect that when I was writing, I had no idea that it will happen. That when people read the book, it triggers something in them. It triggers their own memories, and whether willingly or unwillingly, they start healing. So this is like I see as a side effect of reading my book, or at least getting familiar with the idea of past lives. Because if one believes that we are soul or we have a soul and soul does not die and soul travels, where does it travel? What happened to it? What happened to all of us as collectively? This book answers some of the questions, or maybe to many more of the questions than some.
Yes, for sure. Well, I believe, the mind is so powerful. So if even someone's like, we talk about creative visualization and visualizing. So that's why I think people, if they aren't as believe as much as you and I do, that it still can be beneficial because the mind's so powerful and it would allow you a chance to heal, like even simply taking yourself back. And I've had weird things happen throughout that I'm like, you know what? Kind of like a deja vu, right? Which I can't explain it logically. Why don't you talk a moment about deja vu?
Yes, deja vu is a great example of our body that we reminds us that we were in a place where we know we were not there before. And I have a good example of deja vu experience when I was at Ellis Island. If anybody was at Ellis Island, they know that long corridor that all immigrants had to go through before they saw the judge or whatever they needed to go, needed to see. So I remember walking in that corridor, started crying. Tears came up, and I was very surprised at what happened. I asked myself, and the voice inside said, "You were here before." That really took me by huge surprise. So when I started writing this book, because that experience happened about 10 years ago. It's not like I came home and started writing right away, but I remember that experience. And when it came time to write the book, I basically interviewed that voice. And this is how the memories of past lives came forward about that child that was walking with his mother, and she was holding his hand and dragging him through this corridor, and he was crying. That's why I started crying.
I was in France one time. I bet I was probably in my 20s, maybe early 30s. And I was with my mother and we were going to do some tour. I don't know if it's the catacombs in France or what it was, but we started to go down. I had an immense panic attack. I'm like, Mom, I can't do it. I went in there and I always wondered, I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's a connection to a past life because I freaked out. And she was really great. I'm like, I'm going back up. I don't care if they say I can't do it. I can't. It was just so overwhelming. Like nothing could explain it. It's not, I wasn't feeling sick earlier. I had nothing else on the trip. And all of a sudden it was, wow.
Yes, yes, it's your cell memory warn you not to go there because something has happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. What made you want to write your book?
What made me want to write my book? Well, I want to give you a little bit of history. Um, Before my 40th birthday, I had a dream. And in the dream, my husband handed me a book, a large book, looked like an album. And he said, this is a book of your past lives. I made it for you. In the dream, when I started looking through the pages, I saw 2 pages open. I saw 2 pictures. And the rest of the pictures, when I woke up, I could not remember, but most of the pages were glued together. They were stuck. I could not flip them. When I woke up, I remember the dream. I wrote it down because I have a tendency to write down my dreams when I remember them. And I started asking people what happened, why I had this dream, why I could not open the pages. And people who are in knowing, they told me, you were not ready to see the pictures. They were probably too traumatic. And that's why I could not see. So when it was time when I had more and more of those experiences, like I was burned, I had the memory of being burned, and I had other memories. I decided to write them down. And the name of the book with the outline, with the coloring of the cover came to me like at once during the meditation at my yoga practice. Yes, everything came at once. And turning the pages, that's how I was turning the pages from the book on my dream that my husband made for me. That's why this name came up.
That's fantastic. So do you have a favorite? You don't have to want people to read, but if you were like, I don't know if that's like trying to choose your favorite animal or your favorite child or whatever, you're like, don't ask me that, not that. But is there one that you're like, wow? Or maybe, let me rephrase that. Maybe is there one that you're like, wow, this had such a profound impact on me, or I had such a healing shift from this particular past life?
Yes. And one of my favorite chapter that I would suggest people to read if they don't read the whole book is about my dog Pepper and me, who was a horse in one of my past lives. That is remarkable. I still believe that it's absolutely remarkable how I found him through the pet adoption. I looked at his eyes when he was 3 months old. I had to take him home. I brought him home. We always call him Pepper, you like a horse, because of his awkward body, his face, his tail. Everything did not look like he's a dog. He was a dog, but he was a horse before. And when he was 9 months old, he had a hip dysplasia. And he started limping. He could not walk. And doctor said he needs a surgery. So you either put him to sleep or he needs a surgery. He had a surgery. So for the rest of his life, he lived with a plastic hip. How did I find out that he was my horse? I had a group regression. And in the group regression, the facilitator said, look at your feet, look what you wear, and look who is near you. Near me was a horse, but it was Pepper. And when the last day of his life was when he was injured and he bled to death, but he was injured exactly in the hip, where in this life, he had a surgery. So when I connected all those dots, I was amazed myself. So I want to invite people to look at their special relationship with their animals, whether it's a cat or a dog. Look at how they come back to our lives. I remember reading a book, Same Dog Twice. How they come back to our lives. And I have examples that I did not cover in the book, but I eventually will, that my cat came back to me. My cat of 17 years came back to me as a kitten very shortly after he died. So I believe that would be my favorite chapter about pets and past lives.
I love that because I belong to some groups and I see people like, well, can our pets reincarnate? Can they come and be in the same life with us? And we just had to unfortunately say goodbye to Joey, who was almost 20 this past summer. My husband was his human, but someone told me then without prompting, they're like, oh, I see you in kind of a jungle and I see this relationship with you and your husband, and Joey's a panther, but you were able to but I've seen it with people that just have that special connection with animals and they're anyway. So I think that that's really important. I'd love for you to go ahead. Do you have something to say?
No, I'm listening. I'm fascinated by your story as well.
Our affirmations for decluttering support you in releasing clutter at a deeper level. The meditation begins with focused statements on releasing clutter, followed by powerful positive affirmations for healing, and end with completion statements. The affirmation concludes with a reaffirming meditation exercise to fill where clutter was released. 9 clearing clutter affirmations to choose from. Go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com to learn more. Couple thoughts. One, can you talk about, I've seen people talk about soul groups. So was your experience when you had your past life that there were some people that were in multiple past lives with you?
Yes, I do have this experience. I also want to write, I started writing a second book, tracing exactly the same thing that you're discussing. I want to know how this long-term relationship that I have a girlfriend since we were 9 years old from grade school, who we were before. I have another relationship with a woman who is much older than me, who I consider my spiritual mother because she always guided me. Go here, read this, listen to this. So I traced my relationship with her. Yes, I believe we travel in paths, in soul groups, whether it's a family, I believe karmic relationship, friends is different because if we don't like something, we can leave them and go. But there are some friends that's very hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
And I have a chapter about such relationship in my book that seemed like I could not get of this toxic relationship until I traced back to certain lifetimes. And eventually I said, that's enough. And I was able to cut the cord.
Well, I will share. I'm not going to get in a lot of detail because this interview is about Allah, but she did some card reading for me, and it came up a pattern that I have with women and female friendships. And she was able, and I said, "Oh, I'm really down." She's like, "Well, let's look at it." And so she drew these cards, and it was really very profound and crazy. And hearing her talk and looking at the cards, it was really able to crystallize for me. This is a pattern. Like until that moment, I wasn't able to really see that. And so like what happened in the past, what do we need to clear that? So that's again, to me, another great example of how beneficial it can be to learn our past lives and do that and how it can help clear. Now you mentioned a moment about, I loved about your horse and the cat and the hip. It's probably hard to tell, but can't tell with this, but I have a very scar. I have a burn here and it's much better. I was really angry for a long time. It was really purple and angry. But what's interesting about that, it was a heat burn. I was pulling something, and so hot water scalded my entire arm. And years later, so I was in my 20s when this happened, I think 22, 23. And so someone said to me, not knowing or being able to see, "Oh, you were something about my arm and a soldier and having it sliced off." And it was where the scar was. And again, it's like one of those random things. I know people, I'm like, I don't discount it because it's something I couldn't known or seen because and so it was very interesting to me, and that really rang true to me, that it made sense that anyway, I felt that connection. What do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I remember years ago reading a book by Sylvia Brown, Past Lives, Future Healings, where she discussed that in certain age, when something happened to us that caused either death or some kind of traumatic experience, that can happen in this lifetime, pretty much the same age that I was able to trace a few of my past lives when it happened and how it had connected to this life. Yes. So your burn, I have my hip breaking when I was 13 years old. I was able to trace this. So there are connections, invisible connections, but once we start becoming aware of them, becoming more mindful about our life, then it's like a paper when it's clear, but when you put something, it turns the color. What is it? Lakmus paper?
Yes, I think, yeah, absolutely. That's a great description. I think of the what was it when when you're filling in the thing and then you write and magically appears.
Yes.
How is your different? I've read, it's been a while, but I read and my interest in past lives first started with Brian Weiss and reading, and I'm apologize, I can't think off the top of my head what the name of that was.
Many
But
lives, many masters.
thank you. I think your book is different. I want you to talk about how your book is different from other books on past lives.
My book is different in the way that Brian Weiss and Sylvia Brown and other people, they were talking about case studies. They were talking about other people, about their experience, but they did not talk about themselves. My book is different in a way that I interviewed my past lives. I interviewed myself. And I was able to make connections to my present life on my own, whether I did Gestalt or I did a little bit of channeling. But this, I believe for me, it was the most cathartic in many ways experience because I did it on my own.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I haven't read anyone else that's done that. And to me, it's such a, I would assume, I haven't done it, but it would be a powerful exercise to interview yourself, to be able to kind of get to that place of neutrality.
Mhm.
And, just would have, for me, I would hope it would lead me to have more compassion for myself, or to make those connection, understand like, oh, I'm going to have compassion for you that you freaked out when walking down the stairs into this catacomb thing because there was something that it was a terrorized you. So of course, instead of being like, oh, come on, why are you being afraid? I think that you could hopefully help with healing and compassion.
Yes. And compassion comes from when we understand something, it's an understanding doesn't come from necessarily from the intellectual mind. It comes from heart, where it's like heart resonance. When we resonate with something, that it's easier, it's more prone to be compassionate. And
Absolutely.
compassionate toward ourselves allows us then to be compassionate toward others.
Absolutely. It all.
Animal, or it's a pet, or it's another human, and especially child.
Yes. It all starts with us. If we judge ourselves, we judge another. If we're unkind to ourselves, we're unkind to others. I think that's so important. What do you hope people get from reading your book?
My goal, not my goal, but my desire for people who read my book is to become self-aware. This is so important, to have higher level of self-awareness that will allow them to change their life and unclutter their life in many ways that they were not before. Healing, I'm very big on healing memories, healing bodies, healing relationships. So the book will allow them to start the process of their own self-healing.
That's amazing. I always, when I talk in my podcast, I always like to leave people with ways to take action. So obviously reading the book is to take action, but what would you say to someone who maybe is like, oh, I don't know about past lives, or what could they do if they're like, you know what, this sounds interesting, and how can I interview myself? What would you say to them in any way, shape, or form to take action?
I would say to them, the first thing is to become aware. Okay, I'm not interested. Why I'm not interested? I'll start dialogue with yourself, the inner dialogue that we all have, but many times we're not even aware what we're chatting about. Because that is mindfulness. So become more mindful of what thoughts are crossing your mind. And some of them, say goodbye to them, just so long. And some of them, try to engage them in conversation the same way when I was at the Ellis Island. What happened? Why am I crying? You were here before. Tell me more. So engage in more self-aware conversation. And even if you don't like to journal or don't like to write, I would suggest you still to have a little notebook and start taking little notes. That will become, like for me, it became a book. Who knows? Maybe you are a future writer and you will be writing about your experiences.
I love that. And I often say on the podcast, awareness plus action equals change. And I think it's so important because I think that most people, it's easy for us to point the finger at someone else and say, oh, you're a blah, blah. But self-awareness is much more challenging.
It's challenging because we are afraid to look at ourselves. It's easy to look at other people and point to them what we are hiding about ourselves. You know, it calls projection.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But this is where the healing, this is where the fun begins. When we start knowing ourselves, not about ourselves, but knowing ourselves better, what our dislikes are, what our likes are, where our attitude is coming from, why we react and not respond, and sometimes we respond and not react. So all of this constitutes spiritual intelligence, not just emotional or intellectual, but spiritual intelligence that combines all of it. And spiritual intelligence, I read, is a soul intelligence. So I think it all helps us to bring our consciousness, our collective consciousness, on a different level. So by doing this, not only you are taking care of your own needs, your own decluttering, but you are helping the larger consciousness. And that's what I want to leave your listeners with.
I love that. Okay, well, I was going to say, I wanted to make sure, was there anything else that I didn't ask or anything else that you'd like to share?
I would like to share one thing. Be courageous, be creative, and allow yourself to dream and imagine things that are not here. You know, imagination is about envisioning things. So be a visionary for your own life.
I love that. Now, I want you to do you have a website? How can people get the book? And again, I'll put everything in the show notes, but tell where to reach you or whatever else you'd like to share.
You can look at the website. It's my name, Alla Kaluzhny, the lowercase.com, allakaluzhny.com. It's a website. You can leave me a note. You can write down, if you read the book, you can write down about your experiences. And I would encourage you to do so, because my vision for my third book, I have not completed the second yet, but the vision for my third book is to interview people who read my book, who left me a note, whether in an email or in a website, because I want to interview them and write down about their experience, what they remember, how it changed their lives. That's my vision for my third book.
Wow, I'm impressed. You're organized, you're decluttered, you've got the trio of books going on there. That's awesome. And again, I'll put everything in so you can just click to her website, and I'm sure it's available on Amazon because that's where I purchased it. So you can go there and get it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And you can leave a review once you read it.
Yes. And as a fellow author, read reviews. That's how it gets found. We need the algorithm. Unfortunately, so much is done by that, but rate it and review it and be kind. So thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Julie. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Alla. As always, everything's in the show notes. If you ever feel like you can't find the information, contact me. You know, I'm very particular about who I have as a guest on my podcast. I'm inundated almost daily with requests to be on it. So I only want to bring you people that are amazing, awesome, and I think that are going to enrich your life. So I hope that you gained some wisdom and maybe opened your heart and mind a little bit. Go out, clear your clutter to create the life you choose, deserve, and desire. Clearing your clutter allows you to share your gifts with the world. Get your free self-assessment to discover your clutter priority at reawakenyourbrilliance.com. If you've enjoyed Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, please rate, review, and share us.